Okay, all right, now we're live. So if you were here just a moment ago, I apologize for that. I don't quite know what happened, but something was not working with my camera and none of my cameras would turn on. So I am so glad you're here. We are going to be talking about the mindfulness and the zen of our stitching and how to enhance that. And I've got four I've got four tips for you today and some bonus information for you at the end. So stay tuned. I'm Suzi Quillen. I'm the Empress of Yarn here at Perfectly Knotty on this beautiful mid-fall last day of November here in the Pacific Northwest, and I am just so glad that you are here. And I am going to be switching back and forth between my camera screen and my notes because I want to make sure that I cover all of the points that I mapped out for myself to talk about. But we're going to be talking about the powerful elements of being mindful in our stitching and some ways to help us connect to that. So what we're going to be talking about today are creating a mindful space to be doing our crochet, and I've got a couple of ideas for you on that. We're going to talk about our breathing, and we're going to talk about our ergonomics, and we're going to talk about how to connect with our physical sensations, our kinetic responses, our physical sensations, not just in the logical way that we're often used to, but in some ways that are maybe a little bit more mindful. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the benefits of that and how that impacts our stitching as well as our life. All right, so let's get started. So mindfulness is a term we hear a lot. It's become really very popular. Presence, being present with a moment or present with a thing. These are terms that have become really popular, but really they have connections that go back a long, long time in meditation. And we see that language a lot around around our exercise. In particularly, you hear about that with things like yoga, the martial arts, and things of that nature, where you're moving your body with a lot of intention, and we're paying attention to what's happening with our muscles and grounding ourselves. And I want to help us to draw some of that into our stitching process. Mindful is also about focusing and being very present with what we're doing. Mindfulness is something we think about. Maybe we don't think that's kind of a funny term, isn't it? It comes up, I think, around our eating. Those times when we're not eating mindfully and we're just sitting there zoning out on the TV and just putting food in our mouths. We don't taste it. We don't feel it. We don't even know when our body is full. And those are some examples of mindfulness. And I want us to practice bringing those sensations and those mind-body connections into our stitching. So let's start with our workspace, okay? I don't know about you, but if my workspace is in chaos, so is my mind. I don't need my workspace, whether it's here in my office or out in the living room at my comfy chair or in my tote bag when I'm traveling. I don't need my stitching workspace to be pristine. It does not need to look like an operating room. I need it to be my own version of organized and orderly. so that I know where to find my things and I'm not looking for things, I'm not losing things. We all can have that absent-minded professor thing that happens in our head. And I want all of us to be aware of that and think about some little things that we can do. On Thursday morning, I straightened up around my stitching area. It was prompted because we had some company coming over, and it started with just a little bit of dusting. And then I thought, you know what? I'm just going to tidy this up a little bit. And I did, and I switched a little table around, and I don't like it. And I've noticed on Friday and Saturday, or I guess today is Saturday, I noticed yesterday when I was sitting there knitting that it just still doesn't feel right. My little side table that I picked is too high. And so when my beverage is above my shoulder, and there's an ergonomic thing that happens there, and I'm having to lift my arm up, which can cause shoulder injury. So I want you to think about the space that you're stitching in. Are you able to sit in a way that supports your posture, your low back, your legs? Are you sitting with your legs down all the time? That can cause some circulation issues. So have an option to be able to put your feet up. Is it a recliner? Is it an ottoman? But then again, I also want you to be aware of this inclination with a reclining chair to be reclined and then stitching, and that can cause the bottom of your back to sway out, and that can cause its own ergonomic issues. Each of our bodies is different and is going to need support in different ways. So I'm not here to tell you that there is a right way. I want you to just think about your body and pay attention to it when you're stitching, and pay attention to what your body is needing and what it is asking for. Are you finding yourself slumping and shoulders and rounding forward? What's happening there is you're tightening all of these muscles right here, your pecs, and these muscles across the top of your chest, and you're weakening the muscles in your upper back. So let's think about ways that we can bring our shoulders back and our necks up a little bit more. And maybe for some periods of time, it is being in more of a reclined position, which is fatiguing to have your arms up here after a while, especially if you're working on a heavy object. So pay attention to your body, your ergonomics. Also, in creating your mindful stitching space, let's think about the atmosphere that we have going on. Do you have enough light to see what you're doing? Too much light. I'm pretty sensitive to bright light in particular, and it can cause some migraine-like behavior. And I get in this corner of this eye, I will get eye twitches if the light is too intense. But also, if it's soft lighting, I find myself squinting and not really seeing very well. Think about what's coming into your ears. Sometimes I'm stitching and we are watching football or some documentary TV show. Do I want to pay attention to the show, or is it just background noise? That's often what's happening with some of the football, to be honest, unless one of my teams is playing. But if I'm home alone and I'm stitching, a lot of times there's nothing going on. There's no noise at all, or I'm listening to an audio book. Think about that connection for you. What is it for you that's going to bring you something that's calming and that's going to allow you to connect with that part of your stitching that is relaxing for you? I find that if I'm working on a pattern that's complicated, or I'm trying to design something and I'm having to write a lot of notes as I go, I don't want any noise going on at all. Even if it's a fairly simple piece, I can get easily distracted in my mind. It can be, it is very ADHD like, and I And I recognize that I have that in my head. I often will describe it as a snowman inside a snow globe, but it's not just snow in there. There's glitter, and there's confetti, and there's bubbles, and it's just a lot of stuff. And then somebody's shaking it, and it can just get really crazy in there. So there are times when I have to be aware of how activated my brain is, and be very intentional about how much more I'm pumping into my brain. I have a couple of pieces of music that I particularly am drawn to that help me to focus and concentrate. They're orchestral. One is a duet for piano and cello, and the other is an a cappella cathedral piece, and it's in German. And I know that, and I have them saved, the files saved, and I can just play them. And I know that when they play through, that gives me, I think it gives me 14 minutes between the two pieces. I believe so. 14, 15 minutes, something like that. And if I can focus through till those two pieces are done playing, I really find that helps quiet my brain and helps me to connect to my work. And I will say that this is not just with my stitching, but this is just my work in general. Another really powerful part of being mindful in our stitching, and this connects again with our ergonomics, and that is our breathing. That is something that I honestly do sometimes have to remind myself to breathe. I am a breath holder, so when I'm concentrating and I'm focused, I do hold my breath. And then that causes tension. And of course, obviously, we need to breathe. And I think it's a very interesting thing for me because I have a background throughout my childhood. I was trained in vocal arts as well as I played wind instruments. I played the flute and the clarinet. So I learned how to breathe in those capacities, which also means I can take in air and I can utilize a good breath of air for a long time without having to take in more air. And it makes me aware of my breathing until I'm not. And there are times when I'll find myself not breathing. I've been holding my breath, not like holding my breath. I've just stopped a conscious exchange in and out. It's very interesting, and I need to sometimes remember to breathe. And it's funny because every time I hear that word breathe, I automatically will take a breath in. And it doesn't matter if it's related or not. Sometimes it's so funny. It'll be in a commercial and they'll hear that word and I breathe. So do breathe. Pay attention to your breath. Make sure that you are expanding your belly when you breathe. Not just up here in your chest. Get it down deep in your lungs. Take in the air. One of the breathing techniques I learned in my vocal training is to breathe in to your belly and don't close your throat. Learn how to hold your breath without closing your throat, and pause. Count, make whatever count you want. Count to 4, count whatever is comfortable for you. And then instead of exhaling, take in just a tiny little bit more air and a little bit more air. And then when you exhale, instead of like exhaling like a balloon that just got set free, practice controlling that exhale. And then take that big, deep cleansing breath in and out. In through the nose and out through the mouth. And make a noise when you're doing that. When you're doing those breaths, make noise. Whatever, practice some different ways of those that allow you to be in charge of your breathing and not your breathing in charge of you. Oh, so I like those tips. Those help me. I do different ones based on what I'm doing and what I'm sensing that my body needs. So we're also going to talk about being mindful with our stitching technique. Now that we've organized our space and we've prepared our body and our mind and we're ready to stitch, we're sitting down with our knitting or our crochet, and I want you to now get present with your stitching. I want you to feel your yarn. Okay? I want you to be aware of your yarn. I want you to allow it to flow gently through your fingers. I've been seeing lately a lot of young and new stitchers that are wrapping the yarn around their fingers multiple times, and they're creating a lot of tension in their fingers. They're creating a lot of, which therefore creates a lot of physical tension in your wrist, and it also puts a lot of stress and tension on your yarn. And I want you to practice allowing the yarn to flow through your fingers. You don't need to strangle your yarn or your fingers. I'm getting comments from people, especially newer stitchers, who are struggling with getting rashes or indentations and irritations on their fingers. And a lot of times that's because they are applying too much pressure with the yarn to their skin. We don't need to do that. And I don't know where this comes from. Your yarn should just be loosely in one or two fingers and over a finger when you're crocheting. Similarly, when you're knitting, when I'm knitting, if I'm throwing, which means my yarn is in my right hand, I'm not even really holding on to it that much. I'm just picking up and move my thing. And each time, and same thing if I'm doing picking, it's just over a finger. I'm catching it with these two fingers right here, and I'm holding it where I want it with this finger. It comes up here, it goes behind this finger, and over this finger. That's it. I want you to take a look at the way you're holding your yarn and make sure that you're not hurting yourself or stressing your yarn. Okay. Now, once we start stitching, I want you to be focusing yourself on the rhythmicness of your stitches, whether you're knitting or you're crocheting. Sometimes it's so beneficial to speak, whether you speak it out loud if you're home alone or just inside your head, but speak the rhythm of the stitches into your stitch. The yarn goes around, pull it through, and use a calm voice for yourself as you do it, and just repeat it over and over and over and over. You'll notice in a lot of my stitching videos, if you go back in my YouTube history and look at the videos where I'm teaching very specific techniques, like my crochet basics series, where I'm teaching you how to crochet, I use what I call my meditation teacher voice, my yoga teacher voice. And I am doing that. I'm speaking to myself, to you, in those videos in a gentle voice. and I'm repeating it very rhythmically, very soothing. I've had a number of people that have commented and said that they like to watch my videos just because of the soothing rhythmicness of my voice. And when you watch those videos over and over and over, you start to get that rhythm into your head. And there is a calmingness that happens for ourselves in that. And I want you to be able to connect to that, whether it's my voice in your ear or your own. Find it, tap into that so that you can stay present with what you're doing. We also make a lot fewer mistakes when we are staying present with the rhythm of what we're doing, until we get so hypnotized by the rhythm that we just keep going far longer than we needed to. And I think many of us have done that. I just enjoyed stitching I was just in a groove on my stitching and I went 4 or 5 inches further than I wanted. Oh dear, we've all done that, but that's, more time. It's the journey. And then on that note, the next item on my list here about being mindful with our stitching technique is to acknowledge and accept the mistakes that we make. Let go of perfectionism. Even machines mess up and make mistakes. Let go of perfectionism. Embrace the creativity of your process. Now, this doesn't mean you're accepting and leaving mistakes in your work. What this means is that you're not going to allow yourself to be stressed about a mistake in your stitching. This means that you are going to just recognize that mistakes happen. It's all part of the stitching process and the stitching journey. And sometimes we have to look at those mistakes that we made. And this is a really great opportunity, again, to connect with your mindfulness and ask yourself, how did I make that mistake? There's the logistic part of how you made the mistake, right? How I made the mistake. Oh, I just made the stitch incorrectly, or I missed a stitch, or I was out of order in my stitch pattern. But the root cause of that mistake is most often that I was not being mindful. I was not present with my stitching. I was not connecting with my stitching. I was being distracted by a conversation with my husband. I was distracted by, I just had an idea and I want to go look a thing up. And I set it down and I didn't come back to where I was. And there's no beating up. There's no shame. None of that in this. It's just an acknowledgement of, see what I did there. And then assessing what we need to do to correct it. The other night, I started a new pair of socks. And you might have seen a couple of posts I had on social media about that. When I knit socks, I like to make both socks at the same time. I like to use 2 9-inch circular needles. So you've got half of the stitches on one needle and half on the other, so that I've got on my knitting needle, I've got on needle 1, I've got the bottom of the sock, bottom of sock 1, bottom of sock 2. And then on the other needle, I've got the top of sock 1 and the top of sock 2. And it's a little bit of an optical illusion, especially when you're first getting started with a toe-up sock, because there's not as many stitches. And I accidentally got my needles out of order and I knit the bottom of one sock to the top of the other sock and had my needles crisscrossed. And it happened because it was the end of the day and I was getting tired. And I recognized, thankfully, there were only about 12 stitches that were involved. But I had to set it down and I had to walk away from it And then the next morning, when my head was clear, I was able to sit down and go, okay, let's solve the problem. And I had to take another needle and move some stitches onto a holding needle so that I could get the needles back going and figure out where it needed to go. And then I needed to unknit those stitches. And I could have been really frustrated and just ripped the whole thing out and started over. But I was really liking the way that the toe was shaping, and I really didn't want to start over. And I decided it was a good opportunity to get present and stay present with it. And it took me about 10 minutes. No noise, no sound. It was just me home alone. And I was able to just do that. We don't all have that luxury, I know that, of being home alone when we're stitching. I am just have that experience in my life right now. And I like to take advantage of that. So then there's other things, like on the beginning of it, I have one little spot on a side of a toe where I'm not particularly happy with a one increase row. But I also started fussing with it, and I'm going to embrace that, and I'm going to leave it the way that it is. And I'm going to make that one work out. It'll stretch. It'll be fine. It's on my foot. So being present with our mistakes and being able to recognize what's important. Are you putting these in the fair to be judged? Well, then let's approach those corrections with a different mindset. Okay? We're just making a thing for ourselves just to express creativity. That's a different mindset. In this particular case, the sock yarn that I'm using is a self-striping sock yarn, and it is designed to knit a top-down sock, one sock at a time. And if you do it by their little recipe, your stripes will match. Well, I'm not very patient about that sort of thing, and I know that about myself. So I know that if I want my socks to match perfectly, they're not going to be self-striping. They're going to be a solid color. So I am making this pair of socks from opposite ends of the skein of yarn. So they're not going to match at all. And I'm only going to make them ankle high. So I'm not even going to use all the yarn anyway. And I'm embracing that for this pair of socks, because the decision I made with this pair of socks is that it is about the knitting process and having a pair of socks that I can wear in my sneakers that nobody's going to see, just me. Oh, so let's wrap this up, you guys, and talk about the benefits of being mindful with our stitching. When we can get present and connect our thinking and those scattered thoughts and help to bring them together, and we can improve and connect all of that with our focus and our concentration, we can have a lot of benefits. One is the impact on our brain. There's a huge neurobiological connection in being creative, in the rhythmic movements of knitting and crochet. It's very tactile. It's very kinesthetic. It brings all of our body together, our mind, our eyes, our physical sensations, the movements, the rhythms. It expands our creativity. It also allows us to tap into creative problem solving. That enhances outside when we learn that we have the power and we have the skills to fix an error in our stitching and still end up with a beautiful finished thing. We now possess that skill. And the bonus to this, if you've been waiting to the end to get to the bonus to all of these skills being able to create a space that brings calm, even if it's a tiny little space, like your travel project tote bag with all of its awesome pockets and your things organized, or your comfy place in the living room. When you recognize that you have, I'm going to use the word control, but I don't think that's the right word. But when you recognize that you have the authority over this little piece of territory, and you get comfortable with that, you can start making your area of authority for organization grow a little bit. Maybe today it is your tote bag that is always organized and you know where your things are. And then it expands out to your tote bag and a drawer. Think about how all of these skills that we learn in connecting with our stitching have broader life application. It enhances our creativity, which allows us to tap into problem solving in some very different ways. We've all played yarn chicken and lost, and have had to do some creative problem solving to decide how we're going to address that. Are we going to back the work up and make it smaller than we originally intended? Are we going to dig into our stash and find a different yarn to complete it with an accent trim or something? Think about how we can apply those in other areas of our lives. Immediately, I'm thinking of cooking. We go to make something and we're 3/4 of the way through the recipe and we realize we either don't have enough or we're missing an ingredient. And we have to think, how am I going to move forward? And that is creative problem solving. We do it in our knitting, we do it in our cooking. Let's tap into how we can apply that to the rest of our lives as well. And then what comes out of that, the ultimate bonus in this, is it increases the enjoyment that we get when we are fully engaging with our stitching experience. It is so satisfying to take this ball of string and these pointy sticks if you're knitting, or this little tiny crochet hook, and wave them around together, and magically you have a thing. You've just turned a ball of string into a thing that is fun and playful. If you've made an amigurumi toy, it's useful. It's wearable to keep you warm or to comfort someone who needs to feel that hug from you. We have expanded our ability as humans to tap into and utilize the skills that we have inside of us in other areas. So I really hope that some of these tips resonate with you. Tell me in the comments if anything resonated for you in that. I am going to go over and look at the live stream chat. There are no chat people. It looks like maybe just 1 or 2 people have joined in on the live stream. So, but that's okay. If 1 or 2 of you watched this and got something out of it, I want to know about it, because you, whoever it is that's watching this, you are the reason that I talk about this. Oh, Connie is here. Hi, Connie. You are the reason that I talk about this stuff. You are the reason that I share my love and my joy of my knitting and my crochet. So here in the United States, we just wrapped up our Thanksgiving. It is Small Business Saturday. So here in the United States in particular, this is the big old shopping holiday. And if you're on my email list, you know that I'm not having a Black Friday sale or Black Friday weekend sale. But I do have a bunch of really fun things coming up for the 2024 Advent season. So starting tomorrow, December the 1st, I have a short daily email for you. And so if you haven't signed up for my email list, head on over to perfectlyknotty.com, sign up for the emails, and it's going out to everybody. There's nothing special you need to do. And every day from December 1st through December the 24th, you're going to get a short email with tips, tricks, ideas, some special deals that are only going to be available through the Advent. And something I've never done it before, and I'm kind of excited about it. We'll see how it goes, and I hope it's engaging. I hope everybody likes it. And then the other big bonus thing to let you know, because I'm not having a Black Friday sale, and circling back around, I got to take a sip of my coffee. Hold on. Okay. Oh, that was really tasty. Speaking of being present and mindful, good slurp of coffee. I have been adding more and more items to the online store in the closeout and clearance section of the store. So you can go to perfectlyknotty.com/shop and click on the clearance and closeout section. There are pattern books. There's the last of these cute t-shirts over here. The last of those, they're on clearance. They're just $10, you guys. Limited sizes. And they are fitted. I love mine. I actually usually have one on when I'm doing a video, but and I'm adding some yarns. I've added a few of the yarns that I'm no longer going to be carrying. I am, for my own peace of mind, I am scaling back the physical items that I sell. So if you're interested in the items that I offer here at Perfectly Knotty, I would absolutely love your support of my small business. Shop those items now while they're available, because they are limited to stock on hand, and follow along. Keep your eye out in the clearance section and in the email. That's where all of that's going to happen. It's on the website and in email. So there you go, guys. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you if you're watching on the replay. I really appreciate it. Make sure you subscribe to this channel. Make sure you heart this, thumbs up it, whatever your thing has you do. Hey, those super chats, by the way, are amazing. I've gotten a couple of those recently, and that is so meaningful. If you're gaining something out of what I teach you and you want a way to say thanks, hitting that super chat and buying me a cup of coffee, it all adds up. It means something to me. It helps me to know how to help you. And it allows me to keep doing this. So, all right, everybody, have a beautiful weekend. Enjoy your time. Remember to be connected and grounded. Remember to be present with your stitching, your breathing, your ergonomics, the sensations in your hands. All right. And I'd love to hear more. Come back and comment on this and tell me what you think. Tell me what you've experienced, what's working for you, or what you're struggling with, so that we can talk about it some more. All right. Thanks. We'll see you next time.